We talk a lot about generations, don't we? We compare them, rank them, and argue about who had it harder or easier. But there's one generation that always seems to get skipped, quietly left out of the conversation. The kids who grew up in the 1970s. And maybe that's exactly why they became one of the strongest generations of all. Not because they were louder or demanded attention, but because they learned very early on how to stand on their own 2 feet. If you grew up in the 70s, you know childhood looked completely different. Adults weren't hovering over you. Parents weren't constantly watching, checking, explaining, or intervening. You were outside. You were gone for hours, sometimes all day, and no one really knew where you were or worried too much about it. Now, this wasn't neglect in the modern sense. It was just how life worked back then. You learned early that the world wasn't a padded, safe space. You fell down, you got hurt, you figured it out. This was the first psychological shift that shaped 70s kids. They learned that safety wasn't guaranteed. That lesson, repeated over and over, quietly built a powerful resilience. Think about it. In the 1970s, pain wasn't treated like a crisis. Scraped knees, bruises, even broken bones. The response was rarely panic. It was usually, walk it off. Rub some dirt on it, or you'll be fine. There was no long discussion about feelings, no deep emotional processing. And while that might sound harsh by today's standards, it created something incredibly powerful. Kids from the 70s learned that discomfort doesn't automatically mean danger. As adults, this shows up as a kind of emotional toughness. They don't collapse under stress. They don't panic easily. They've already learned that pain passes, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they've survived it before. Then there was one of the most underrated forces that shaped this generation: boredom. Real, profound boredom. Hours of it. There were no screens, no endless entertainment, no constant stimulation. When there was nothing to do, you didn't complain, you adapted. You invented games, you explored, you built things, or you just sat there with your own thoughts. Psychologically, this was huge, because boredom taught 70s kids how to self-regulate. They didn't need constant external stimulation to feel okay. They learned how to just exist without a steady stream of input. As adults, this becomes a massive strength. They can tolerate discomfort. They can sit in silence. They don't need constant distraction to function. That's mental endurance, a skill many people today don't even realize they're missing. In the 1970s, independence wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. You were supposed to figure things out for yourself. You solved problems on your own because you didn't always have someone to ask. If something went wrong, the first thought wasn't, who can help me? It was, okay, what do I do now? This built a deep psychological trait: self-reliance. Kids from the 70s didn't grow up believing help would always arrive. They grew up believing they were the help. As adults, this often looks like incredible strength, but it can also be a quiet burden. They don't ask for help easily. They tend to carry things alone and assume responsibility, even when it's heavy. That strength didn't come from a place of overconfidence. It came from pure necessity. It was forged in the quiet moments of being on your own, facing challenges, and realizing you were the only one who could get yourself through it. Maybe that's why they're the forgotten generation. They never learned to ask for the spotlight. They were too busy building their own. Remember growing up in the 1970s? It was a different world. Many of our parents weren't very emotionally expressive. It wasn't because they didn't care, but because emotional openness just wasn't the norm back then. You weren't constantly praised or endlessly reassured. Nobody told you how special you were every 5 minutes. And while that might have created some emotional gaps, it also built something else: emotional containment. We learned how to function without constant validation. We learned how to keep going without applause. As adults, this has become a unique kind of emotional strength. We don't need constant approval from others to feel good about ourselves. We don't collapse when we're ignored, and we certainly don't define our worth by how much attention we get. We learned early on that your value isn't something handed to you, it's something you carry quietly inside. And what about safety? Let's just say safety standards were a bit different. Seatbelts were often optional. Bike helmets were a rare sight, and danger felt visible and, well, normal. Because of that, kids from the 70s developed a different relationship with fear. We learned to assess risk, not just avoid it entirely. We instinctively knew when to be careful and when to accept that some things are just inherently dangerous. As adults, this shows up as courage. We're not reckless, but we're not paralyzed by fear either. We understand that life involves risk, and avoiding all danger often means avoiding growth and new experiences. Here's a strange truth about growing up back then. In many ways, no one really cared. Not constantly, not emotionally, and definitely not in a protective, hovering way. And while that might sound harsh today, it forced us to develop our own internal strength. When no one is watching, you learn who you really are. When no one comes to rescue you, you discover what you're truly capable of. Kids from the 70s didn't grow up feeling special. We grew up feeling responsible. And let me tell you, responsibility builds strength much faster than praise ever could. Another thing was the pace of life. You didn't get things instantly. If you wanted something, you didn't just click a button. You saved up your allowance. You waited. And sometimes you never got it at all. This shaped something very deep in us: delayed gratification. It wasn't a skill we learned from a book. It was just a fundamental part of life. As adults, this is a superpower. We don't need immediate results to stay motivated. We don't panic when progress feels slow. We don't fall apart when things take time, because we understand that most meaningful things in life are built gradually, piece by piece. Because everything took longer, frustration was just a normal part of the day. A busy phone line didn't mean you were being rejected. A delay didn't mean something was terribly wrong. A pause didn't mean it was the end of the world. This built a kind of psychological endurance. We learned that discomfort doesn't require an instant fix. We learned how to just sit with unfinished moments. As adults, this shows up as patience under pressure. While others are rushing and panicking, we tend to wait and pause. That ability alone can make us seem strong in a world that's addicted to speed. Growing up slower also gave us something else: perspective. In today's world, speed is often mistaken for competence. Immediate responses, instant opinions, constant output. Many of us from the 70s feel a bit out of sync with this, not because we can't keep up, but because we just don't feel the need to rush. We're comfortable letting things unfold naturally. We understand timing, and timing is a form of power. We weren't constantly reacting to a flood of information. We weren't pulled in 1,000 different directions. We had time to observe, to think, and to reflect. This shaped a generation that doesn't overreact easily. We don't assume every moment is urgent or treat every problem like a 5-alarm crisis. We've lived through plenty of waiting, and we know that most things pass. That calmness is sometimes mistaken for indifference, but it's not. It's perspective. But this strength did come at a price. Many of us struggle with vulnerability. We downplay our own needs and minimize our pain. We're strong, but often we're tired. We're resilient, but sometimes emotionally distant. Because strength, when you have to learn it that early, can become a suit of armor. Still, when life gets difficult, when things fall apart, when the pressure really hits, this generation doesn't panic. We've been here before. We're the strongest generation, not because we had it the hardest, but because we had to adapt without a guide. We didn't grow up expecting comfort. We grew up learning endurance. We didn't learn strength from motivational quotes. We learned it from experience, from boredom, from independence, from risk, and from being left alone to figure it all out. And that shaped who we are today: quiet, resilient, independent, and emotionally controlled. Strong, not in a loud way, but strong because we had to be. And maybe that's why we don't mind being forgotten sometimes. We never needed the attention to survive. We already learned how to stand on our own. If this video made you feel understood, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more stories to share. Thanks for watching.